Welcome to the Grand Archive Academy here at Maindeck. I'm Dan, and I'll be your Academy guide today as we deep dive into Alchemical Revolution's new Guardian starter deck featuring the stalwart champion Tonoris. Now we have a lot of information to cover today, so consider the chapters below your lesson plan and feel free to jump to whichever parts you need to learn. Now if you're ready to become a Guardian Master, grab your pencil and your notebook because class has begun. To begin our lesson for the day, let's make sure you're all in the right place. Alchemical Revolution features 3 new starter decks, and not only do they each focus on a different champion and a different basic element, but they each have a different level of complexity so players can find the deck that fits their personal preferences and playstyle. The Guardian starter deck features, of course, the Guardian champion and the Wind element. The playstyle of this Wind Guardian deck is what we like to call mid-range, or in other words, a deck that has the ability to play either more aggressively or with more focus on controlling the speed of the game as the situation dictates. The Guardian champion can shield its units from damage even if he has to take the damage himself, giving it strong board presence, especially in the late game as he unlocks the Neos Advanced element, the element of creation, which allows the construction of massive armies and limitless weapons. The Guardian is also great at getting into the fray and attacking himself. His attacks are generally more cumbersome to use, but pack a massive punch. Of the 3 new starter decks, the Guardian starter deck is actually the least complex and the easiest to learn to play effectively, while still maintaining a deep range of strategic options. Let's dive into exactly how it works. Alchemical Revolution introduces a huge host of new keywords and gameplay ideas that are intended to set the stage for future sets and differentiate these new champions from the first 4 that were released. To set you up for success in your academic journey, let's start by going over both the old and the new concepts that you're going to be exposed to in this Guardian starter deck. We'll start by talking over all of the old keywords from the previous sets that you'll find in this deck. Taunt. If an opponent declares an attack and a unit with Taunt is awake, they must attack the unit with Taunt. Tonoris uses his Taunt on the turn he levels to 1 to shield his allies from harm. Don't forget that resting a Taunt unit will shut off the Taunt, and if 2 or more units are both awake and have Taunt, the opponent is free to choose any Taunt unit to attack. Floating Memory. During your Materialize phase, you can banish any number of cards with floating memory from your graveyard to pay for that much of the memory cost of the card you are materializing. Make sure to do this before randomly banishing anything from your memory to pay for the rest of the cost if needed. And watch out for class and level bonus on your floating memory. Your champion must currently meet the requirement listed in order to use the floating memory. Vigor. A unit with Vigor will wake up at the end of its controller's turn. Tonoris can use Rousing Slam to get an attack in, and then wake up at the end of the turn so that the taunt he also gains is active. Intercept. Intercept allows a unit to redirect an attack towards your champion to the Awake Interceptor. This does not rest the unit, but if you choose to rest the unit to retaliate and deal damage back to the attacker, rested units are unable to intercept attacks. Note that you cannot intercept attacks that are directed towards your allies, only your champion. Suppress. Suppressing a card will temporarily banish that card until the beginning of the next end phase. This allows you to temporarily remove annoying cards from the board, such as opposing taunt units or interceptors. When it returns, it will re-enter play awake, and it might trigger on-enter effects, so be careful with what you target. Buff Counter. A buff counter can be represented by any die or coin and is placed on an ally. It gives that ally +1 power and +1 health. Next, let's talk about the 3 new keywords that you'll find in this deck. Foster. Allies with Foster will give you a special bonus if you can keep them safe for a whole turn. At the start of your Recollection phase, if the ally has not been dealt any damage since the end of your last turn, it will become fostered, and it will often gain a constant or one-shot effect of some kind. Using methods to redirect damage like Taunt or prevent damage like Martial Guard will be key in helping your units foster their potential. Note that an ally can only be fostered once. Once they have become fostered, They are unable to be fostered again unless they were to leave play and then return later. Summon and tokens. New to Grand Archive is the concept of tokens and summoning them. Summon effects will create a token card in play representing something. These token cards are not actual Grand Archive cards, though the starter deck includes cards to represent exactly what tokens it can create. When a token is summoned, take an appropriate token card, or, if you run out, a coin, a die, a Pokemon card, a shoe, or just whatever you have available, and place it into play representing that object. The Guardian deck can summon tokens of automaton drone allies, obelisk domains, and weapons. When a token leaves play, instead of going to your graveyard or banishment, it is simply removed from the game, as it is not a real card. Otherwise, the token will act like a normal card of the appropriate type while it is in play. Now that we've explained all the mechanics you're going to see, let's dive into the deck list and look at each card in the deck in detail. The full deck list is displayed here on the screen. Feel free to pause if you need to look at it. You'll get a full 60 card deck and 12 card material deck. Let's dive into the cards, starting with the material deck. Your game starts with the basic Spirit of Wind, allowing you to draw 7 cards and enabling the wind element. Tonoris' levels 1, 2, and 3 are next. His level 1 provides taunt the turn you level up, so the opponent will be unable to attack your allies for that turn unless he becomes rested. His level 2 is very straightforward. The attack he performs that turn gets +3 damage, which can be used to take out a large threat, or more commonly, just deal a ton of damage to the opponent's champion. His level 3 is where things start to get super exciting. Not only is he super resilient with a massive health pool of 30, and he unlocks the Neos element, each turn during your recollection phase you can summon one of 3 obelisk domains that you haven't already summoned. These will allow Tonoris to build a massive value-producing factory. So let's take a look at what those obelisks do. Each obelisk has an activated ability that costs some amount of reserve, reduced by the number of domains you control. The obelisks are domains themselves, so don't forget that they'll reduce their own cost. The Obelisk of Protection prevents damage to a unit. The Obelisk of Fabrication summons an automaton drone token with a buff counter. And the Obelisk of Armaments summons an Aura Steel Greatsword token. Looking at the rest of the material deck, we have the Bulwark Sword, a powerful sword with high attack and 2 durability that requires a cost to use. The Charged Mana Plate, which can be used to draw an extra card if Tonoris takes 4 or more damage in a turn. The Crest of the Alliance, another card drawing item, but this time if a fostered ally you control dies. The Power Charged Shield, one of the more niche items, but one that allows you to grant vigor to a taunt unit, often Tonoris himself, letting you attack and still keep your taunt up that turn. The Worn Gearblade is an interesting weapon that can be used to attack and can be used to protect, and gains durability when your automatons die. The Deployment Beacon has 2 abilities. It summons an automaton drone both on enter and on leave. There are no ways to make this item leave play within the starter deck, but there are some very cool cards you can include if you want to get full value from this on an upgrade. Finally, there are 2 Neos Regalia in the deck. Don't forget that you cannot materialize these until your champion has reached level 3. The Sentinel Fabricator allows you to summon automaton drones similar to the Obelisk of Fabrication, and the Archon Broadsword is a super powerful 2 durability weapon that gets +1 power for every token you control. That means +1 for each obelisk, automaton drone, and Aura Steel Greatsword, making it easy to rack up the damage. Now let's dive into the main deck. Starting with the allies, we have the Stalwart Shieldmate, a reprint from Fractured Crown, but with new art. With Taunt and Floating Memory, she's an excellent way to protect your other allies or soak up some damage, and can be used for value after her job is done. The Imperial Recruit is an efficiently costed 1/3 ally who becomes a 2/3 after being fostered. The Novice Mechanist rounds out our 2-drops as a 1/2 who summons an automaton drone after being fostered, and you'll see effects later that will greatly benefit having a lot of allies in play. Next we have Recruitment Officer, an incredible value card that provides a 1/3 stat line for 3 reserve and lets you dig for another ally when she becomes fostered. The Young Peacekeeper is a great ally to find with this. For 3 reserve, she's just a 1/2 with floating memory, but by keeping her safe, she'll foster into a 2/3. Finally, the Imperial Sentry is our lone 4-drop, offering a 2/3 stat line with intercept that becomes a 2/4 when you're at level 2 or more. This deck includes several attack cards as well. Heavy Swing is a monstrous 6 damage attack that has its cost reduced to 4 when you're at level 1 or greater. This is a huge damage source that can swing a game in your favor, especially combined with Tonoris' level 2 effect, but take care to watch out for your opponent's effects that might prevent it. Rousing Slam is an excellent card to play both offense and defense with, pushing a solid 4 damage and, on level 2, allowing your champion to gain Taunt and Vigor so he can awaken and protect your board during the next turn. And Cyclonic Strike is actually one of the more complicated cards in the deck. It's a 4 damage attack, but while it's in your intent, or the area where your resolving attack cards exist during combat, you can choose to use its activated ability to reduce its damage and instead suppress an opposing ally. The ability has fast timing, so it can be used anytime while the attack is resolving, even in response to an opponent's fast speed effect, say a prevention effect, or after they declare an interceptor. There are also a variety of cards you can use to buff or protect your allies or champion. Martial Guard is a flexible 2 damage prevention action that also has floating memory once you're at level 2, so it's a useful card for leveling up to 3 or for playing your Archon Broadsword. Take Point is another way to give your champion Taunt for a turn, and has a class bonus floating memory as well. Fortified Mana Shield is a stronger prevention effect that is cheaper when targeting unit with Taunt, but it only works against non-combat damage. Into the Fray is one of 2 effects that can help you power up your attacks to a greater degree with more allies in play, and it's at a cheap 2 cost with class bonus floating memory as well. Winds of Retribution is the other one, and while it's pretty costly, it costs less at level 2+, and this effect can create a massive amount of damage if you've been able to protect your allies for a couple of turns. Finally, let's look at the Neos Advanced Element cards, which are some of the huge payoffs that you can play only once you've reached level 3. Neos Sight is a simple, fast spell that allows you to draw a card and draw an additional card into your memory if you control 8 or more objects. Remember that objects include your champion, which still only counts as 1 card even if it has a stack of cards under it. Your allies, your weapons, items, and domains, and your tokens absolutely each count as an object as well. Summon Sentinels can help you quickly build an army, especially if you've been able to build up Tonoris' obelisks to make it super cheap. Smash with Obelisk can easily be a game-ending attack, with a strong 6 damage for 3 cost already that requires you to sacrifice one of your domains to give it even more power. In the starter, that will always be one of Tonoris' summoned obelisks, and they will give it +3 more damage. Just be careful not to get your attack negated or prevented, as losing an obelisk can be a big loss if you aren't ending the game with it. Speaking of which, the final card is an SR that gives Tonoris one more option to close out the game. Assemble the Ancients will let you transform your obelisks into an army. By sacrificing all of your domains, you'll get 3 automatons with 3 buff counters on each. Rested, but with vigor, so they'll be able to retaliate if the opponent tries to attack them on their turn. This is a rare card to play, but a powerful way to close the door on a close game that has gone very late. Now, let's go through a few strategy tips to help you have better first games with the deck. As I've mentioned, the Guardian deck is the least complex to play, but there are still tons of strategic choices that you can make in every game that will absolutely impact whether you can win or lose that game. Depending on your opponent and their plays, you'll want to make a decision every game as to whether you're playing as the aggressor, the player who has the advantage in a direct race and is attacking the opponent's champion to win faster, or the control player, who focuses more on preventing damage and attacking opposing allies to clear them from the board. Against the Cleric and Mage starter decks, you're almost always going to be attacking their champion directly to try to end the game before they can gain a huge advantage at level 3, and you'll want to aggressively play and attack with allies to achieve that. Against Warrior, Ranger, and Tamer, it will depend on what they are playing to the board and how fast they are attacking. While Tamer has to build up to it, Warrior and Ranger can push out a surprising amount of damage quickly, so taking time to attack their allies instead can run them out of steam as you build towards overwhelming them at level 3. You also have an advantage as Guardian, your ability to activate taunt effects at the right time, which can help you control the flow of the game in those matches. While your taunt effects can protect your field from attacks, keep in mind it does nothing to prevent direct damage actions from targeting your allies, and Cleave gets to entirely ignore it as well. Be careful against Warrior, Mage, and Cleric, who all have ways of wiping the board. Warrior in particular can use Lorraine Blademaster and Hurricane Sweep combo to not only wipe your allies off the board, but draw a card for each one killed this way. A back-breaking combo. When you're afraid of a potential incoming board wipe, hold back on your allies a bit and focus instead on landing attacks with cards like Heavy Swing or Bulwark Sword. Rushing to level 3 as Guardian is usually not necessary. Timing your level 1 taunt and level 2 damage boost at times when they'll be most useful can be more important. And if you get to be the aggressor, it's common to be able to win the game while you're at level 1 or 2 by just keeping a steady flow of allies hitting the board, and instead materializing cards like Bulwark Sword to add additional damage to your turns, or Crest of the Alliance and Charged Mana Plate to keep cards flowing in. At level 3, your goal is to overwhelm the opponent with creation of threats. From automaton drones to aura steel greatswords, Tonoris can manufacture far more board presence than other champions. Take your time and play carefully until you can find an opportunity to push damage in with your drones or attack with a game-ending smash with Obelisk. Finally, keep your eyes open for opportunities to use cards like Winds of Retribution and Heavy Slam to steal games. Your opponent will not always see your damage potential, so if you're doing the math with these cards in mind, you may find that less obvious strategies can result in surprising wins. For example, instead of playing a slow game going to level 3, you may find an opportunity to use a floating memory to materialize Deployment Beacon to get another body on the board. And if you've managed to protect, say, 3 other allies, you could turn a 4 to 5 damage board into a surprising 12 or 13 damage board with a Winds of Retribution. After playing dozens of games, we think the Guardian deck plays exceptionally well on its own right out of the box. You'll find the deck quite consistent, and players who love interactive combat and huge swings will find a ton to enjoy in here. That said, there are tons of options for upgrading the deck, both with new cards from Alchemical Revolution and cards from previous releases, so let's take a look at a few of those. The Dawn of Ashes common Rallied Advance is actually a Guardian class bonus as well, which could be a great card to play as an efficiently costed attack that really takes advantage of keeping a board of allies out. Being able to activate a solid attack the turn you level to 2 and still play an ally or keep up interaction can really improve your pressure on the opponent in the mid-game. Zephyr is an incredibly useful rare from Dawn of Ashes, and it would make an excellent interaction piece in this deck with some very strategic uses. It allows you to suppress any ally or regalia, including your own, so you can use it to gain the on-leave and then regain the on-enter trigger of Deployment Beacon, or to reset the durability counters on one of your weapons. One of the trickiest things you can do with it is to actually suppress your own foster ally on the opponent's turn. If that ally was already fostered, it will come back fresh and unfostered, great for effects like recruitment officers, but either way, if it remains undamaged, during your next recollection phase it will become fostered, as the ability doesn't care if the ally has remained in place since your last turn, only that it hasn't been dealt damage since then. Set 3 may be the time to shine for the Fractured Crown SR Lancelot Goliath of Asa. While he's costly and enters play hindered, he's an impressive turn 1 play if you're going first, where you're unable to attack anyway and you don't have your taunt available yet to protect foster allies. Lancelot allows you to pay reserve to push high damage when attacking, which lets you commit less to the board while still pressuring the opponent. Excellent if you fear decks that will cleave or comet fall your board away. A trickier but effective card to play from Fractured Crown is the rare Innervate Agility. Tonoris works beautifully with almost every part of this card. It requires him to be leveled and have taken 5 damage to play, as recovering 5 is a cost of the card, but he is happy to taunt damage to himself as he levels anyway. Imagine this, you can use this as level 2 Tonoris to shield your entire board from either spells or attacks, healing the damage you've absorbed and de-leveling back to 1. And then you can level to 2 again to regain that +3 damage to your next attack. While this would be costly to execute, the advantage can be high, and including more floating memory allies like Swift Recruit and Honorable Vanguard can give you more options to pay those leveling costs. And from Alchemical Revolution, look out for some incredible new cards to support this new archetype. Seasoned Shieldmaster is an impressive captain for a foster-focused build, providing both card advantage and stat buffs if you can use Guardian's tools to keep your board safe. There will be few scarier cards to see hit play the turn you level to 1. And another potent SR, Rose Eternal Paragon, allows you to redirect even attacks aimed at your allies to her. And even without that, her fast activation will let you play carefully, keeping up your hand to play interaction cards, or playing her at the end of your opponent's turn if you had nothing else to do. If your opponent is making fostering your allies difficult, the common Organize the Alliance will let you immediately trigger a foster ability, plus it has floating memory to get you back some value after playing it. Finally, there are additional Neos cards to play with in the booster set as well. I really like the ultra rare Neos Elemental, and it would make an incredible finisher if you tweak the deck towards going long and building out a board. His host of keywords means he'll be huge, wake up at the end of your turn, taunt your opponent, and retaliate against anything that attacks him, even if he's rested. Depending on your build, he could be a very cheap card to play and end the game on his own if they can't find a way to remove his massive body. Regardless of how you tweak the deck, I am sure you will love playing the new Guardian starter deck from Alchemical Revolution. For your next class, feel free to click on either one of these videos here. One of them is actually our lesson covering the Cleric starter deck from Alchemical Revolution, and the other is our friends at TM32 covering the new Ranger starter deck. I hope you guys enjoyed that one. Thank you so much for watching, and class is dismissed.